Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rokah HaKadosh. Double honors to the elders and bishops of Great Millstone who teach and rule well. Salutations to the beloved prophets and brothers out there who are exhorting the sheep. This epistle is going to be entitled To Train Up a Child in Righteousness. We'll bring out some precepts and hopefully we can make an impact on hopefully some parents out there and others who wish to become parents in the future, that this is the only and correct way to raise a family and to train up children, and it's to be established in righteousness. And what is righteousness? It is the observance of keeping the law, statutes, and commandments to the best of your abilities, to be given grace to receive that faith, to abound in all things, is what is proclaimed in the blessings and the curses. So we want to establish righteousness within the home first and foremost, in orderly, and it starts with the head of your home, the priest of the home, the man. It first starts with a Yahweh-fearing man in the home, and not just any man, a man who has understanding. Because as you train up children and you raise them, sons and daughters, you're ultimately going to want them to be equally paired, equally yoked with other children of their age, when they're appropriately of age, to take on a helpmeet, and to be established in righteousness. So that way they are well guarded, and they have the supreme power, Yahweh, guiding them and directing them in every sense of the way. And it starts within the home. It starts with a submissive woman, a non-contentious woman, a woman that doesn't want to be the man and the woman in the home and bring war and destruction into the home. There's all kind of precepts in the scriptures to substantiate these things, and they're all based on truth, fact of the matter. And as we build our children up in understanding, bite-sized pieces, we should surely show them the examples that are already presented in the world of how sinners and lawlessness continues to grow exceedingly, and not to go in that way. And they need the light given from the head of the house, passed down to the woman, down to the children, to receive that wisdom so they're not walking in error. So the first precept I like to jump right into is found in Deuteronomy, one of many of the best books in the scriptures. Deuteronomy chapter 4. We'll start at Deuteronomy chapter 4 and read to verse 9. It says, Hear, O Yasha Allah, and Yahweh our power is one. So I'm sure if any of you have dove into this precept, particularly in the Israelite awakening, when we awaken, we return back to our natural tongue, our Lashon Kodesh, and it's spoken as such: Shema Yasha Allah, Yahweh Allah Hayanawa, Yahweh Achad. Right? Verse 5. And thou shalt love Yahweh thy power with all thine heart. Stop. What is loving Yahweh, your power, with all your heart? This means to keep his word. That precept is found in John 14 and 15. If you love me, keep my commandments. This is the love of the Father. So how we truly love our Father, and we show that we're walking in obedience, is to hearken unto his word and keeping his ways. And one of his ways is to instruct our children in righteousness as well, because that is true love, to set boundaries established by the Most High himself, Yahweh. Verse 5 again. And thou shalt love Yahweh our power with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words, which I command thee this day and forevermore, be in thine heart, in thine mind. Always keep in mind how to walk in observance of his word. So that's being obedient. So you know how to correctly walk through those trials and fires. Verse 7. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, And thou shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. This is a pattern of continual instruction. It doesn't mean that you are walking around behind them and saying, thou shalt not do this and thou shalt not do that. You add correction when correction is needed according to the scriptures in righteousness. Does that mean to always swat at them and go around screaming at the top of your lungs to get a reaction? This is not the right way to get the instructions across to, whatever children. Some children need, to have a rod put to them. But we extend mercy and grace, because as we build long suffering in ourselves, they also pick up on these fruits that are also needed in righteousness, because they have to see a very righteous behavior in front of them. You'll hear the argument, why should I listen to you? All you do is scream and throw things, or whatever the situation is. So it starts with having order in the home first, with the man, the woman, and then the children, and then the dogs and the chickens. Everything has to be established in righteousness. Now, for those of you women out there that may not have been yoked as of yet to a helpmeet, a man of the Most High Yahweh, first and foremost, to be instructed in righteousness, continue to build yourself up, get some understanding so you can be a contender against those other women who have no understanding, because righteousness can only be paired with righteousness. Light with light, not light and darkness. It will surely cause some destruction in the home. Continuing on in Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 8. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and thou shalt be as frontlets between thine eyes. So as you bind these instructions to your hand, your works are going to substantiate that you're walking in the way of righteousness. You're not going to put your hands to anything that will evidently cost you some salvation points, or to add on sin and be built up in iniquity, because then the judgments that come from that are a setback. They're a monumental setback, because sin separates you from the power of your Most High, because now you're given over to the adversary for judgment, and you don't want that. You want to continue to walk in righteousness and be established in understanding, and pass that down unto your little ones, the children, because if you're not girding them up in the word and teaching them diligently to the best of your ability, and seeking out those who have the wisdom to be instructed as likewise, you're not doing anyone due diligence. You're leaving them up to be passed through the fire of Molech eventually. Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 9, it says, and thou shalt write them upon the post of thy house and on thy gates. This doesn't mean go outside with a magic marker and start writing precepts all over your house and on the doorposts. And this is an inward expression on how the area surrounding you should be in order, right? Because if you are trying to establish righteousness in order first and foremost in the spirit, everything around you is going to resonate from that. You're not going to have trash all over your yard or whatever the case. But that the establishment in righteousness, keeping his word, is going to be evidently clear on how you live. People aren't going to come into your house and have to kick over something and have a seat. Whatever the case, you're going to live clean and organized, so that way everything is put in proper order. Boom. So next verse I'll grab is Deuteronomy 32. I have Deuteronomy 32 here. So we're training up children in righteousness to guide them in the way they should go, so they have a better life experience underneath the blessings and not the curses, right? Deuteronomy 32, verse 46. Where are we at? 46. Deuteronomy 32 and 46 reads, "And he said unto them, Set your hearts unto all my words, which I testify among you this day, which ye shall command your children to observe to do, all the words of this law." So as our forefathers received the covenant on Mount Sinai, you receive those instructions, and then ultimately by a vow and an oath, you're extending that unto your seed as well, saying that you are going to keep his word and his promises, because he will require it of you if you are not doing those things. They come with severe judgments. So it's important to train up children so that way we don't have a society of lawlessness and chaos, because generations and societies are built on the offsprings of those individual parents and those families. Do you have any family values? Are they being passed down on the children, chiefly starting within the words of the Most High Yahweh, right? So we must train up our children correctly. And it starts with the man of the house, the priest, then the woman, and so on and so forth. And the Most High will do the rest. That's all you have to understand, is that if you're doing the best to live in a way that's pleasing to the Father and obeying his word and receiving sound instructions to be guided in the way in which you should go, and teaching your children diligently as well, the Most High Yahweh will set everything in order after that, because he says, "Seek ye the kingdom first, and all these things will be added unto you." If you want your house set in order, if you want peace in the home, he will ultimately have a design to put all those things in order, no matter what they are. I guarantee it. Next verse is found in the book of Proverbs. Man. Proverbs chapter 13. Eeks. Here we are. Proverbs chapter 13 and 24. Oh, yeah. "He that spareth his rod hateth his children, but he that loveth him chasten him betimes." So you see these relationships between parents and their children, how they have this friendly relationship. You know, they want to dress up like each other, they want to wear makeup to match each other, they do all these things on a friend level. But that's making your children an equal to you. They're not going to receive instructions from a friend. So he says, "He that spareth his rod hateth his son and or daughter." So if you don't establish correction on a continual basis, showing authority within the home, starting from the man on down, there's going to be things in the home that's out of order, because there's sound wisdom for everyone to be instructed in the home in righteousness. To establish righteousness is to obey his word, to be given that mercy. If you're establishing your foundation within the Torah, chiefly in the home, you will receive the mercy and the grace to abound and continue to grow in understanding, you know, because we don't want to be under the law. We don't want to be subject to the law, but we want to be given that grace and mercy, saying we're doing everything according to our understanding, according to your wisdom, and passing it to our children. So we're not always having to bring out the rod, you know, because if we spare the rod, there's individuals outside that aren't going to spare the rod. You understand? There's people out there that's not going to show mercy. So if we're walking in the way of righteousness and training up our children in the way of righteousness, there's not going to be no more sobbing and crying in the home about losing a child. What we got here? Let's go to in the Apocrypha, the book of Ecclesiasticus or Sirach, chapter 7, starting at verse 23. It says, "Hast thou any children? Instruct them, and bow down their neck from the youth. It says, if you have children, make sure you're having a firm grip on their behavior while they're small. You have to keep a close eye on children, because, they're frantic sometimes and they just want to run amok. When they see other children, they just want to play and do all kind of folly. And, you have to set them in order. You see children chasing each other with sticks and throwing rocks and things like that. And if you're just letting it slide, ultimately it's going to lead to an issue. One of those children is going to bust out a window, and then you're responsible. You have to pay for it. And I know you don't have the money to just go and keep fixing windows and, all this folly. So you bow down their neck from the youth, and they will find that eventually over time, if you're doing it correctly, that's love. They're going to seek you and ask you questions and ask guidance for you. And you may not have the answers, but that's going to cause you and push you to keep searching to teach. I don't have that answer right now, baby. Let me pray on it and ask the Father for wisdom. And he will instruct you to teach the children. First and foremost, it has to start with the man in the house. I'm going to keep harping on that. Not all men are good, but one who fears the Most High Yahweh, he's going to show himself worthy in every area. Ecclesiasticus chapter 7 and verse 24. Hast thou daughters? Do you have any baby girls? Do you have any daughters? The women these days, man. Hast thou any daughters? Have a care of their body, and show not thyself cheerful towards them. Like I said earlier, you can't be a friend to your children. You have to instruct them in the way of righteousness. And if the parents understand what righteousness is, and they're walking in it, and they have the fear of the Most High Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, they're going to observe his words, put the fear of the Most High in them, so that way they will be established in righteousness, having a good foundation, that sure foundation, established on the rock, which is Yahweh Shai, right? Hast thou any daughters? Have a care of their body. Don't let them go on outside looking like that. Don't do that. You got to be observant in their behavior, what they're doing, what they're into, what they're listening to. And it's not to be, a walking tyrant in the house, but observe it. Observe it closely, have it on your radar, and make the corrections. And then ultimately, if it comes to that moment where you have to spare the rod, where you don't spare the rod, then, that's how you handle it. Verse 25 of Sirach chapter 7, it says, marry thy daughter, and so shalt thou have performed a weightier matter. This is predominantly speaking to the father in the house. It says to marry thy daughter. Those with no understanding and don't have a spiritual lens will look at this verse and shut the book. Right? So, marry thy daughter, and so shalt thou have performed a weightier matter. So, if your daughter, who is of a marriageable age, has not found, or the Most High has not granted her as of yet, to be equally yoked to a man of understanding, then the father performs the duty of a husband. Not in a sexual way, but you say, darling, the attire that you have on is not appropriate. It's not even in the season for it. I need you to go and, change or whatever it is, whatever your hairstyle, you have to have, a shamefaced, modesty is beautiful. You know how many men see cleavage and butt hanging out, and the first thing their mind goes to is, look at that piece of meat, But you, training your children up in righteousness, you're going to guard them well, because righteousness is attracted to righteousness. Righteousness is strength. Anything outside of righteousness is death. Same verse. Marry thy daughter, and so shalt thou have performed a weighty matter, but give her to a man of understanding. So, as a father, when that time comes, she may present to you prospects. And depending on the level of wisdom in which you have bestowed upon your children, son and daughters, they will ultimately have the discernment built up in them to choose quality. Quality in an individual does not mean the amount of material things that they have built up for themselves, but chiefly a person that harbors wisdom and sound doctrine established in righteousness, because that is the coin, baby. That's gold. If you can find someone who seeks the kingdom of the Most High Yahweh first, and then everything else will be added to that individual. So if she brings a prospect to you, or your son brings a prospect to you, you're going to know, as a father, a loving father, you're going to say, whatever you got to say in a classy fashion. That's all, do that. Because at this day and age, there's recklessness out there. We see the children out there. They're twerking on top of cars. They're breaking into supermarkets, running out with all kind of trash, pocketbooks and clothes and hoodies and whatnot. Sirach chapter 16, verses 1 and 4. It says, desire not a multitude. This is Ecclesiasticus, better known as Sirach, chapter 16. I love this verse. It says, desire not a multitude of unprofitable children. Yes, the Most High is not pleased with a bunch of unprofitable children. Those that are the seed of Satan, children of disobedience, walking around with no understanding. Starting at age 3 or 4 with the mouth of a sailor. Disgusting. You think the Most High is going to have mercy on those individuals? Keep listening. Desire not a multitude of unprofitable children, neither delight in ungodly sons and or daughters. Though they multiply, rejoice not in them, except the fear of the Most High Yahweh be with them. Trust not thou in their life. Don't think they're going to have a long, lengthy, prosperous life. They're going to endure much sorrow until they're down in the grave. For one that is just is better than 1,000. One that is just, if you go into the Strongs and look that up, ultimately it deduces to be righteousness. And righteousness is observance of keeping the law, statutes, and commandments and walking therein them. So, for one that is just is better than 1,000, and better is it to die without children than to have them that are ungodly. Because now that you have raised all these children as a good mom, a good dad, with no understanding in righteousness, ultimately, you're leaving behind a society of just crazy, wicked individuals. Because walking in righteousness establishes boundaries. It enlightens the minds of those that fear the Most High to separate themselves from the things that cause disorder, sin, and wickedness. That's all I have written down, but I have a verse here. Let's see if I can add it real quick. Deuteronomy. Nope, I read that already. Well, I pray that this was helpful, and I pray that I have given you an appropriate amount of understanding for today, for you to get established in righteousness and seek ye the Most High Yahweh while he may be found, because the way of righteousness is continuing to close. These words, this way of righteousness is going to be scrubbed away, deleted, and the only way to live in those times, in those dark times, is going to be lawlessness, no understanding, and you want to be covered. So, with that said, Shalom.